After visiting the Cannes Film Festival in 1983 to drum up financing for Parasite 2, Charles Band starts talking about his brand new distribution company, Empire International. By 1984, it was a living, breathing entity, and we're going to go through every film they released, one by one. So at this point, the history of Empire International can sort of be split into two eras, before Ghoulies and after Ghoulies. But the before era can be a bit chronologically confusing, so we're going to start with the film that was made first. In fact, it was made before Metal Storm and Parasite. The Alchemist was originally filmed way back in 1981, and while it's certainly rough around the edges and a big step down from both Crash and especially Parasite, it's still strange that it didn't even get a limited theatrical release until 1985, 2 years after it hit video in the UK. But before we talk about The Alchemist, let's talk about Robert Ginty, the baby-faced Larry Bird-looking actor who regularly appeared on television in the 1970s, but found some big-screen fame in the awesome 1980 Vietnam vet revenge movie, The Exterminator. Ginty appeared as the flamethrower-wielding John Eastland, who punches, burns, and grinds up half of New York after his nom-buddy is murdered by some punks. He returned for the sequel and started his own production company in the 1980s, eventually moving on to directing TV before sadly passing away from cancer back in 2009. Here, Ginty plays the thoroughly tortured alchemist Aaron. But don't get too excited, since it's A, a fairly minor part, and B, his alchemy really only consists of some fancy glass blowing. You see, back in 1871, Aaron lived in the woods with his wife, Anna, and his daughter. But a fancy wizard named Delgado, played by Parasite's Robert Glaudini, fell in love with Anna, and uses his magic to make her his slave, I think. Aaron, of course, goes after her, and he and Delgado tussle. In the fray, Anna gets stabbed, and then Delgado curses Aaron by making him live forever and turn into some sort of animal every night. That last part, it's a bit confusing because these werewolf-esque night terrors are really just Ginty wandering around the woods while snarling sounds are played on the soundtrack. Remember that this thing was made in 1981, and werewolves, and werewolf effects, were pretty big then. But here he's pretty much entirely kept in the shadows, though we do get to see him eating a deer. So, skip ahead to present day. Okay, well, not present day, 1955, and I hope you like scenes of people driving around because that's pretty much the entirety of the next 20 minutes or so. First, alone with ex-waitress Lenora, who also happens to be the spitting image of Anna. She stops to pick up Cam, a hitchhiker who gets rightfully spooked when Lenora starts blacking out and swerving all over the road. It seems that Aaron's daughter is actually now quite old and has been caring for her never-aging dad for decades, including tolerating his wild overnight activities. She goes ahead and performs a spell in order to trade her soul for her father's, but in the process something goes wrong, and Lenora, who is the reincarnation of Anna, gets sucked into things. So Lenora runs off the road. Her and Cam run into Aaron in a cemetery, and they end up going back to his place to look at all the expensive glasswares. They don't believe his crazy story about living for 70 years, so they run off and are soon chased by 3 weird goblin things that come out of a magic door. Yeah, things are picking up. In my favorite moment, a now beastly Aaron breaks into the cabin and smashes all of his glass figurines, while his grown daughter Esther cowers. However, she then slips and impales herself on this thing. Yeah, she successfully avoided being slaughtered by her dad for 70 years, but is taken down by this inconvenient spike. C'est la vie. Let's pause here to talk about Alan J. Adler, the writer of The Alchemist. He started his career as assistant director on exploitation movies like Dr. Gore and Hot Summer in Barefoot County before co-writing 1974's Challenge, which was sort of a Billy Jack riff. He would be Charles Band's regular collaborator for the first phase of his career, writing Parasite, The Alchemist, and Metal Storm: The Destruction of Jared Sin, before moving into television work. He even wrote an episode of Brave Star. So, back to the movie. Lenora and Cam kill the goblin guys in gruesome ways, but Lenora is acting increasingly possessed and ends up in the cemetery, going through the portal into a weird hellscape where Delgado waits to try and possess her soul, or something. A distraught Aaron follows her in, and, avoiding the fate from the beginning of the film, stabs Delgado, and ends up taking off with Lenora. They both leave the demon world and reunite with Cam, only for Delgado to reach for her through the portal, which leads to him getting graphically sliced in half. The curse broken, Aaron then ages 70 years and 30 seconds, including this nifty head melt, and Lenora and Cam presumably just get on with their lives. The end. It's not hard to see why The Alchemist sat on the shelf for a while. It's slow and plodding, the acting is poor, the photography is dark, and nothing seems to happen for about 45 minutes in the middle of the picture. There's not even a scene of a car rolling off a cliff and exploding, it just rolls there. Still, it's not all bad. Ginty is a fairly sympathetic lead, and there's real fairy tale pathos in his cursed state and eventual fate. There's also a great soundtrack from Richard Band, Charles's brother, and someone we'll be talking a lot about in the very near future. But it mostly just feels like a made-for-TV movie with a few gory bits to keep the drive-in crowd from falling asleep. Sadly, once the effects start arriving in the final 10 minutes, it's too little too late. It also features an awfully misleading poster. What? But better things are ahead. Next up is a truly strange Dungeons & Dragons influenced fantasy film with 7 different sections, each with a different director. Originally known as Rage War, The Challenges of Excalibrate, and Digital Knights, we're calling it The Dungeon Master.